There are moments when you enter a space and something subtle shifts. Nothing obvious happens. No one says anything openly hostile. No clear conflict appears. And yet, the atmosphere changes. People become quieter. Some grow tense. Others act strangely, overly polite, dismissive, defensive, or oddly distant. If you have noticed this pattern, you may have wondered what you did wrong. According to Carl Jung, the answer often has very little to do with your behavior, and everything to do with what your presence unconsciously evokes in others. Human beings respond to far more than words and actions. Long before conscious thought engages, the psyche reacts. It senses coherence or fragmentation, awareness or avoidance, authenticity or performance. These things are felt. When your presence makes people uncomfortable, it is rarely because you are aggressive, arrogant, or intentionally intimidating. More often, it is because you are not playing the same psychological games they are. Jung believed that most people operate through a persona, a social mask constructed to gain approval, maintain status, and avoid inner conflict. This mask is not deception in the moral sense. It is survival, but the persona is fragile. It depends on agreement, on shared assumptions, on everyone silently participating. When someone enters a space who is less attached to their persona, someone calmer, more self-contained, more inwardly aligned, the unspoken agreement is disrupted. Nothing needs to be said. The contrast alone is enough. People who rely heavily on performance feel exposed around authenticity. Even if they cannot explain why, something in them tightens. Their nervous system senses a mismatch. You are not doing anything. You are being something. Jung observed that the psyche reacts defensively when confronted with qualities it has not integrated. When a person encounters someone who embodies traits they have suppressed, self-awareness, emotional steadiness, inner authority, the reaction is often discomfort, not admiration. Discomfort. Why? Because your presence highlights what they avoid within themselves. If you are calm, it contrasts with their inner agitation. If you are quiet, it confronts their need for validation. If you are grounded, it exposes their inner instability. This contrast is not flattering. It is revealing, and revelation creates unease. People may not consciously recognize this process. They may simply feel irritated, awkward, or compelled to assert themselves. They may talk more than usual, withdraw suddenly, or subtly test your reactions. These behaviors are not random. They are attempts to restore psychological equilibrium. Jung explained that when equilibrium is disturbed, the psyche seeks to regain control. If someone cannot integrate what your presence represents, they will attempt to neutralize it. Sometimes this looks like subtle criticism, sometimes like sarcasm, sometimes like exclusion or avoidance, not because you are dangerous, but because you are destabilizing. You do not confirm their inner narrative. Many people derive their sense of self from comparison. They measure worth through status, performance, and external validation. In such environments, calm self-containment feels alien. It does not compete. It does not chase. It does not perform. And that absence of striving is deeply unsettling. Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming psychologically whole, naturally creates friction with collective. The individuated person no longer needs constant affirmation, and this independence threatens systems built on insecurity. You may notice that people react to you without knowing why. They may misinterpret your silence, project motives onto you, assume judgment where none exists. This is projection at work. They are not responding to you. They are responding to what you awaken in them, and what you awaken is often unexamined, unintegrated doubt, suppressed emotion, fragile identity. Your presence becomes a mirror, and not everyone wants to look. This is why discomfort often appears without cause. There is no logical reason for tension, but the psyche does not operate on logic alone. It operates on resonance, and your resonance does not match theirs. This mismatch is the seed of everything that follows. According to Carl Jung, whenever a strong emotional reaction arises without a clear cause, the unconscious is at work. This is where projection enters. Projection occurs when a person disowns parts of themselves and unconsciously places them onto someone else. These disowned parts often live in what Jung called a shadow, the traits, emotions, and impulses a person refuses to acknowledge. When your presence makes people uncomfortable, it is often because you activate their shadow, not by confrontation, not by criticism, but by contrast. If someone has suppressed their insecurity, your confidence exposes it. If they avoid self-reflection, your awareness unsettles them. If they rely on approval, your independence irritates them. They may not say this directly. Instead, they reinterpret you. They call you arrogant instead of grounded, cold instead of calm, judgmental instead of observant. These labels are not descriptions. They are defenses. Jung explained that the psyche protects itself by externalizing discomfort. Rather than asking, "Why do I feel this way?" the mind asks, "What is wrong with them?" This preserves the ego. You become the container for feelings they cannot face. This is why reactions to you often feel exaggerated or illogical. The intensity does not match the situation because it does not belong to the present moment. It belongs to the shadow. People who feel uncomfortable around you may unconsciously sense that you see more than they want to reveal. Even if you say nothing, even if you are kind, your presence feels observant rather than performative. This is threatening to those who depend on performance. The shadow hates exposure, and exposure does not require accusation. It requires presence. Jung believed that the shadow is activated whenever someone encounters an image of wholeness they have not achieved. Wholeness is not perfection. It is self-awareness. A person who knows themselves does not need to dominate the room, prove their worth, or control perception. This quiet certainty destabilizes those who rely on external validation. So they react, sometimes by trying to assert superiority, sometimes by dismissing you, sometimes by forming negative assumptions without evidence. You may notice that people talk about you rather than to you. They speculate. They fill in blanks with their own fears. This happens because your silence leaves room for projection, and projection fills silence quickly. Jung observed that people are often more disturbed by those who do not explain themselves. Explanation offers reassurance. It reduces ambiguity. It allows the ego to relax. But when you do not rush to clarify who you are, others are forced to confront their own interpretations. And many people dislike that responsibility. They prefer certainty, even if it is false. So they assign you a role, the intimidating one, the aloof one, the strange one. Once assigned, they behave accordingly, not because you earned it, but because it helps them feel oriented again. This is why trying to fix these perceptions rarely works. The issue is not misunderstanding. It is avoidance. If they truly wanted to understand, they would ask. Instead, they react. Jung believed that projection dissolves only when a person is willing to take responsibility for their inner reactions. Until then, the projected figure remains the problem. You may notice a pattern. The more self-possessed you become, the more polarized reactions you receive. Some people feel drawn to you. Others feel inexplicably irritated. This polarization is a sign that your presence carries psychological weight. It means you are no longer blending into the background. And blending in is what keeps projections dormant. Once you stand out, not through dominance, but through alignment, the unconscious wakes up. And when it wakes up, not everyone likes what they see. One of the most unsettling qualities for many people is not confidence. It is calm silence. According to Carl Jung, silence creates a psychological vacuum, and the unconscious rushes to fill vacuums. When you are calm and quiet, not withdrawn, not hostile, simply present, you remove the usual cues people rely on to orient themselves. There is no excessive explanation, no performance, no reassurance. This absence is deeply uncomfortable for those who depend on feedback to regulate their sense of self. Silence does not confirm. It does not validate. It does not compete. It simply is. And for many, that is unnerving. Jung believed that people fear being seen more than being judged. Being judged allows defense. Being seen exposes what is unresolved. When you are calm, observant, and emotionally contained, people may feel as though something in them is visible, even if you say nothing. This perception is often unconscious. They may subtly feel self-conscious. They may talk more than usual. They may attempt humor, dominance, or oversharing. These behaviors are not about connection. They are attempts to regain control. Silence invites reflection, and reflection threatens avoidance. If someone is avoiding their inner life, your presence interrupts that avoidance. You become a mirror, not because you intend to, but because you do not distract. Jung noted that people who are uncomfortable with themselves often fear stillness. Stillness removes noise. Without noise, the psyche confronts itself. So when you bring stillness into a space, you disrupt the usual flow. This is when subtle control attempts appear. People may interrupt you, speak over you, dismiss your contributions, or attempt to provoke a reaction. The goal is not to understand you. The goal is to reestablish hierarchy. Control restores comfort. If they can place you a role, silent, inferior, strange, dismissible, they no longer have to sit with uncertainty. You may notice that people who react most strongly to your calm are those who rely heavily on external validation. They need response, affirmation, engagement to feel real. Your lack of reactivity feels like rejection, even when it isn't. So they react defensively. Jung explained that when the ego feels unseen, it panics, not because it is ignored, but because it cannot anchor itself. Your calm denies them an anchor. This is why some people try to pull you into drama. They may test boundaries, exaggerate emotion, or create conflict where none existed. Drama forces engagement. Engagement restores familiarity. But if you remain steady, neither escalating nor withdrawing, you expose a tactic, and exposure increases discomfort. This is a paradox. The more grounded you are, the more some people struggle around you, not because you are intimidating, but because you refuse to participate in unconscious regulation. You are not managing their emotions for them. You are not mirroring insecurity back. You are simply present. Jung believed that presence is one of the most transformative and destabilizing forces in human interaction. It removes illusion without confrontation. It says nothing, and yet it reveals everything. This is why people who are not ready for self-awareness often avoid those who embody it, or they try to diminish them, because to remain near such a presence requires honesty, and honesty is frightening to those who live through masks. When discomfort is not resolved internally, it often mutates into something else. Comparison. According to Carl Jung, comparison is one of the ego's primary defense mechanisms. Instead of confronting inner lack directly, the ego measures itself against others to regain a sense of control. This is where discomfort around your presence can quietly turn into envy, not the obvious kind, not open jealousy, but subtle, disguised envy, the kind that hides behind sarcasm, minimization, or faint praise. You may notice people making small remarks that undermine your confidence, questioning your competence, downplaying your achievements, joking at your expense in ways that feel slightly off. Nothing dramatic, just enough to reduce the tension they feel around you. Jung believed that envy arises when someone encounters a quality they desire but feel incapable of developing. Rather than acknowledge this inner conflict, they attempt to devalue the external source. If they can make you seem smaller, they feel safer. This is why people who feel uncomfortable around you often focus on your perceived flaws rather than your actual behavior. They look for reasons to dismiss you. They may say you are too quiet, too intense, too serious, or too different. These are not observations. They are attempts to normalize you by reducing you, because normalizing removes threat. Social groups often unconsciously enforce sameness. Anyone who deviates through awareness, restraint, or self-possession stands out, and standing out invites correction. Jung warned that collectives often punish individuation, not overtly, but subtly, through exclusion, gossip, or quiet resistance. You may feel this as a shift in how people treat you. They may stop including you, stop seeking your input, stop acknowledging your presence fully. This is not always malicious. It is protective. Your presence challenges the unspoken hierarchy. People who feel uncomfortable around you may attempt to reassert dominance, not through strength, but through dismissal. If they cannot rise to your level of inner stability, they try to pull you down to theirs. This is why engaging in self-defense rarely works. If you argue, you validate the comparison. If you explain, you invite further scrutiny. If you withdraw dramatically, you confirm their narrative. Jung believed that the most effective response to envy-driven behavior is non-participation, not indifference. Non-identification. You do not take on the role they assign you. You do not internalize their discomfort. You do not shrink to make others comfortable. This restraint frustrates those who hope to provoke a reaction, because reactions restore power. Your refusal to react preserves it. Over time, this may intensify the behavior or dissolve it entirely. Those who cannot integrate their envy will distance themselves. Those who can may grow. Either way, clarity emerges. Jung emphasized that individuation inevitably restructures one's social environment. Some connections fall away, others deepen. This is not loss. It is alignment. People who are comfortable with themselves do not feel threatened by your presence. They may even find it grounding, reassuring, clarifying. Those who are not will continue to struggle, but their struggle is not your responsibility. Your task is not to make yourself smaller. It is to remain intact. When discomfort, projection, and envy fail to restore psychological balance, a new behavior often appears. Testing. According to Carl Jung, the unconscious constantly probes for weakness. When someone feels unsettled by your presence, they may unconsciously test your boundaries to see whether you can be controlled, diminished, or pulled into familiar dynamics. These tests are rarely direct. They appear as small intrusions, interrupting you when you speak, ignoring your contributions, then repeating them later, making jokes that subtly question your confidence, pushing emotional buttons to provoke a reaction. On the surface, nothing seems overtly hostile, but beneath the surface, something else is happening. They are checking whether you will collapse into reactivity. Reactivity restores hierarchy. If they can make you defensive, emotional, or apologetic, the imbalance they feel disappears. They no longer feel exposed. They feel in control again. Jung believed that power dynamics operate most strongly where they are least acknowledged. Passive aggression is not weakness. It is indirect power-seeking. It allows the person to deny responsibility while still exerting influence. If you react, they win. If you explain, they gain leverage. If you become emotional, they feel validated. This is why your response matters more than their behavior. People who feel uncomfortable around you often expect one of three reactions: submission, escalation, withdrawal. All three confirm their unconscious expectations. But when you remain grounded, neither defensive nor compliant, something unexpected happens. The test fails. Calm presence disrupts power games because it offers no hook. You do not need to correct them. You do not need to expose them. You do not need to justify yourself. Your steadiness itself becomes the boundary. Jung emphasized that boundaries are not established through force, but through consistency. A psyche that is internally aligned does not need to announce limits. They are felt. This is why people who rely on manipulation grow uneasy around those who do not react predictably. They cannot read you. They cannot provoke you easily. They cannot position themselves above you. This uncertainty increases discomfort. Some will escalate their testing. Others will retreat. Both outcomes are revealing. Escalation shows a desperate need for control. Retreat shows recognition of limits. Neither is something you need to manage. Your task is not to win interactions. It is to remain internally coherent. Jung believed that when someone is individuated enough to stand in their own center, external power struggles lose significance. They are seen clearly, and therefore lose their grip. This clarity changes the entire dynamic. You may notice that after repeated non-reaction, people either adjust their behavior or disengage entirely. The unconscious learns quickly when a strategy no longer works. This is not coldness. It is self-respect embodied. And embodied self-respect is one of the most stabilizing and destabilizing forces in social interaction, because it cannot be negotiated. When testing no longer works, a final response often appears: avoidance. Some people stop engaging with you altogether. They grow distant, polite, but emotionally unavailable. Conversations become short. Eye contact fades. Invitations disappear. This can feel confusing, even painful, especially if you value the connection. But avoidance is not always rejection. Often it is self-protection. People who feel uncomfortable around you may realize, consciously or unconsciously, that they cannot regulate themselves in your presence. They cannot dominate. They cannot provoke. They cannot restore the familiar dynamics they rely on, so they retreat. Avoidance allows them to restore internal equilibrium without confrontation. This withdrawal is not a judgment of your worth. It is an admission of inner limitation. They are not saying, "You are wrong." They are saying, "I cannot meet myself around you." This distinction matters. Many people interpret avoidance as failure and attempt to re-engage, soften, or diminish themselves to restore connection. But doing so often reactivates the very patterns that cause discomfort in the first place. Remaining steady, without chasing or withdrawing defensively, allows the truth of the situation to settle. Some people will eventually return differently. Others will disappear permanently. Both outcomes clarify your path. As your presence becomes more grounded, your social world reorganizes. This is not intentional. It is inevitable. When you no longer over-explain, over-adjust, or over-give, relationships based on imbalance lose momentum. Those built on unconscious regulation fade. Those built on mutual awareness strengthen. This process can feel lonely, but it is not emptiness. It is clearing. Individuation always brings a period of social contraction. The psyche withdraws energy from superficial bonds to consolidate inner coherence. During this phase, fewer people feel comfortable around you, but the connections that remain feel real. You may notice a shift in who seeks you out. Less performative people, more reflective ones, those capable of sitting with silence. These individuals do not feel threatened by your presence because they are not threatened by themselves. They do not need you to be smaller. They do not need you to react. They do not need you to play a role. They meet you where you are. This is when discomfort gives way to resonance. Not with everyone, but with the right ones. Eventually, you stop trying to understand every reaction. You stop asking why some people feel uneasy around you. You stop attempting to soften yourself for comfort. You stop adjusting your presence to fit unstable environments. Not because you become indifferent, but because you become integrated. You recognize that discomfort is not always something to fix. Sometimes it is information. It tells you where you do not belong, where honesty is unwelcome, where self-awareness is avoided. You learn to trust the signal. Your presence no longer seeks approval. It no longer defends itself. It no longer explains its depth. It simply exists. And that existence carries quiet authority. Not authority over others. Authority within yourself. You're no longer responsible for how others manage their inner world. You are no longer compelled to regulate discomfort that is not yours. You understand something essential. Not everyone will feel comfortable around you, and that is not a flaw. It is a consequence of being real in a world built on avoidance. You stop shrinking. You stop hardening. You stop performing. You remain, and those who can meet you do. Those who cannot move away. This is not loss. It is alignment. Thank you for listening. Until next time, take care of what is truly yours.